I always thought buying land meant owning peace, a quiet sanctuary away from the chaos of city life. Turns out, I was wrong. Because even though I wasn't part of any neighborhood, the HOA next door didn't care. To them, I was just another problem waiting to be handled. I should have known something was off when I first moved in. My land stretched for acres, untouched and beautiful, with rolling fields and a thick tree line marking the boundary. No fences, no subdivisions, just open space and a small house I'd been fixing up. It was exactly what I wanted, until the day they showed up. It started like a joke. A neatly dressed woman, clipboard in hand, walked straight onto my property like she owned the place. I was out back working on my shed when I noticed her standing there, peering around like a real estate agent scoping out a new investment. I wiped my hands on my jeans and walked over, trying to keep my irritation in check. "Can I help you?" I asked. She barely acknowledged me, eyes scanning my yard before flicking down to the clipboard. "Yes," she said in a tone that immediately set my teeth on edge. "I'm Susan, the HOA president for the Maple Ridge community. We've received some concerns about your property." I frowned. Concerns? This land wasn't part of their fancy HOA. The nearest row of cookie-cutter houses was a mile away, separated by thick woods. "I don't have anything to do with the HOA," I said, keeping my voice level. Susan smiled the way a snake might before it strikes. "Oh, I know," she said, "but we like to maintain a certain standard in the area, and, well, we noticed a few issues." She gestured vaguely at my property, as if expecting me to suddenly see what was so offensive. I looked around. My land was exactly as I left it. Neatly trimmed grass, a sturdy house, nothing out of place. "There are no issues," I said flatly. Her smile tightened. "Your shed," she continued, "isn't compliant with community aesthetics. It's, well, an eyesore." I let out a short laugh. "It's a shed," I said, "on my land." She nodded, as if she expected that to be the end of the discussion. "Exactly. And according to our guidelines, all structures should match the aesthetic of the community." That's when I realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. This woman genuinely believed she had authority over my property. "I don't follow your guidelines," I said, "because I'm not in your HOA." Susan sighed like she was dealing with a stubborn child. "We're all part of a community here," she said. "It would be best if you made some adjustments." My patience snapped. "Let me make this clear. I'm not under your rules, and I have no obligation to comply with anything your HOA says." I turned, done with the conversation. But Susan wasn't finished. "If you refuse to cooperate, we may have to take further action," she called after me. I didn't even look back. I should have known that was a warning. For a few days, nothing happened. I thought maybe she'd gotten the message and left me alone. Then the letters started arriving. First, just one. A violation notice with the HOA's logo stamped at the top, claiming I had 2 weeks to remove all non-compliant structures. Then more came. Warnings, threats of fines, legal jargon that meant nothing. I ignored them. Then, the real harassment began. I woke up one morning to find an orange sticker slapped onto my front door. Final notice, non-compliant structure, subject to removal. My stomach twisted. I ripped the sticker off and stormed inside, shoving through the pile of letters I'd ignored. I needed to stop this before it got worse. I drove straight to the county office, letter in hand. The clerk barely glanced at it before shaking his head. "They can't enforce this," he said. "You're not under the HOA's jurisdiction." That should have been the end of it. But that night, my security camera caught movement near my shed. 2 figures in dark clothing, walking along the edge of my property. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped onto my porch. "Hey!" I called out. The figures bolted. I ran forward, heart pounding, but by the time I reached the edge of my land, they were gone. I checked the cameras again. They had been trying to remove my shed's lock. The next morning, a sheriff's deputy pulled into my driveway. "We got a call about an unauthorized structure," he said, flipping through a notepad. My stomach dropped. They had called the cops on me. I stared at the deputy, my pulse hammering in my ears. Unauthorized structure? I knew exactly where that complaint had come from. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady as I explained that this was my land, my shed, and that the HOA had no authority here. The deputy frowned, flipping through his notepad as if looking for something more substantial. He sighed and tucked the notebook away, clearly unimpressed with the situation. He confirmed that there was no legal action to take, that this was a civil matter, and that unless I was actively violating zoning laws, the HOA had no grounds to make demands. I thought that would be the end of it, that maybe Susan would back off once she realized the law wasn't on her side. But I underestimated just how far some people would go when they couldn't get their way. The next few days passed in uneasy silence. No more letters, no more late-night trespassers, no more unexpected visits. It felt too quiet, like the calm before a storm. My instincts were right. That Friday morning, I stepped outside to find my shed's door wide open, the lock broken, and the inside ransacked. My tools were missing, my neatly organized shelves upturned, and a massive red X had been spray-painted on the back wall. My stomach twisted into a knot of anger and disbelief. This wasn't just intimidation anymore. This was destruction. I checked the security cameras, but whoever had done it had been careful, avoiding direct angles and covering their faces. But I didn't need proof to know who was behind this. Susan wanted me gone, and if she couldn't push me out with fines and violations, she was going to make my life hell until I left on my own. I wasn't going to let that happen. I drove straight to the sheriff's office, filed a formal complaint, and handed over the security footage. The deputy nodded, making notes, but I could see it in his face. He wasn't convinced anything would come of it. Without clear evidence linking Susan or anyone from the HOA to the vandalism, it would just be another unsolved crime. That thought sat heavy in my chest as I drove home, my mind racing. I needed to do something. I needed to show them that they weren't scaring me away. That night, I installed more cameras, floodlights, and even a motion sensor alarm near the shed. If they tried this again, they wouldn't get away so easily. For a while, it seemed to work. Days passed without incident, and I almost let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, they had backed off. Then came the night that changed everything. I was jolted awake at 2 in the morning by the shrill sound of my motion alarm going off. My pulse spiked as I grabbed a flashlight and rushed to the window, scanning the yard. Shadows flickered just beyond the tree line. Someone was out there. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my phone, dialed 911, and sprinted outside. The cold air burned my lungs as I ran toward the shed, flashlight sweeping across the yard. The light caught movement, figures darting through the trees, disappearing into the dark. My breath came fast and heavy as I reached the shed, the doors swinging open. The shelves had been overturned again, but this time, something was different, something worse. A single sheet of paper lay in the center of the floor, weighed down by a rock. I picked it up with trembling fingers and read the words scrawled in bold, angry letters. Leave. My grip tightened around the paper as the sound of sirens grew closer. A few minutes later, red and blue lights flashed across the property as a patrol car pulled up. The deputy stepped out, a familiar face from before, his expression shifting from tired indifference to concern as he took in the scene. I handed him the note, my other hand shaking with adrenaline. He looked at it, then at me, his jaw tightening. This wasn't just an HOA dispute anymore. This was a threat. I told him about the figures I had seen, the break-ins, the vandalism. He listened, nodding, then told me he'd file a full report and increase patrols in the area. It was something, but not enough. Because deep down, I knew Susan and her people weren't done. They were just getting started. The next morning, I got the proof I needed. My security cameras had captured it all. Blurry figures moving through my property, a group of 3, their faces mostly obscured, but one of them was unmistakable. The posture, the build, the way they moved, it was Susan. My blood boiled as I watched the footage, my hands clenched into fists. This was no longer just intimidation. This was trespassing, harassment, maybe even conspiracy, and I wasn't going to let them get away with it. I transferred the footage onto a USB, grabbed my keys, and drove straight back to the sheriff's office. This time, when I walked in, I wasn't just filing a complaint. I was pressing charges. The sheriff's office felt colder than usual as I placed the USB on the counter, my pulse hammering in my ears. The deputy from before, the one who had dismissed my earlier complaints as a civil dispute, leaned forward and plugged the drive into his computer. His eyes narrowed as the grainy footage played. 3 figures moving under the cover of darkness, slipping past my cameras, vandalizing my shed. Then came the moment that mattered most. Susan, clear as day in a brief flash of light, glancing toward the camera before yanking her hood back up. The deputy leaned back in his chair, rubbing his jaw. This wasn't just some petty HOA drama anymore. This was trespassing, criminal harassment, and destruction of property. He sighed, muttered something under his breath, then told me they'd be escalating the case. I could finally press charges. It should have been a relief. It should have felt like I was finally getting somewhere. But all I felt was a dull, simmering anger. Susan had been pushing me from the moment she stepped onto my land, convinced that she had the power to control me just because she ran an HOA. Now, she had crossed the line, and I wasn't about to let her walk away unscathed. By the time I got back home, exhaustion was setting in, but sleep wasn't an option. I double-checked the locks, adjusted the security cameras, and kept my phone within reach. The next morning, I got the call I'd been waiting for. The sheriff's department had reviewed the footage, and they were going to pay Susan a visit. That should have been enough to make her back off, to finally make her realize that she wasn't untouchable. But people like Susan don't learn from warnings. They double down. They escalate. And I should have known she wasn't done with me yet. The first sign came that evening. A letter, hand-delivered, stuffed into my mailbox. No HOA branding this time. Just a plain white envelope with my name scrawled in stiff, angry handwriting. I opened it, my fingers tightening as I read the words. "You've made a mistake. We don't want trouble, but if you keep pushing, you'll regret it." A warning. A threat. I could almost hear Susan's smug voice behind the words, like she still thought she had the upper hand. My jaw clenched as I crumpled the paper and tossed it onto the counter. If she thought intimidation was going to scare me into backing down, she was dead wrong. I had barely set the letter aside when the noise started. At first, I thought it was my imagination. Then I heard it again. The sound of an engine idling just beyond the tree line, where my property met the main road. Headlights flickered through the branches, a car sitting just far enough to stay hidden. Watching. Waiting. I stepped onto the porch, my heartbeat steady, controlled. I didn't approach. I didn't call out. I just stood there, making sure they saw me too. The car hesitated, then peeled away, tires kicking up dust as it disappeared down the road. My fingers curled into fists. They were trying to make me nervous, trying to make me second-guess myself. But all they were doing was making me more determined. The next morning, Susan finally made her move. I was outside checking my property lines when I heard the distant wail of sirens. At first, I thought it was just a coincidence. Then I saw them. 2 squad cars, lights flashing, rolling up my driveway. My stomach twisted, but I forced myself to stay calm. I stepped forward as one of the officers climbed out, his expression unreadable as he scanned the area before settling his gaze on me. Then came the words that sent a bolt of rage through my veins. "We received a call about illegal structures on this property and reports of unsafe conditions." My fists clenched as I exhaled slowly. Susan had done it. She had actually called the cops on me. I kept my voice steady as I explained, yet again, that this was private property, that the HOA had no legal authority here, that the shed and everything else on my land were up to code. The officer listened, nodding occasionally, but I could see it in his face. He didn't want to be here. He knew this was a waste of time. After a few minutes of looking around, checking property records, and making a quick call, he sighed and turned back to me. There was no violation, no reason for law enforcement to be involved. This was nothing more than a baseless report. The officer apologized for the inconvenience, got back into his car, and drove away. But I didn't feel relief. I felt something else entirely. I had tried to handle this the right way. I had ignored the letters. I had called the sheriff when things escalated. I had let the law take its course. But Susan wasn't stopping. And now, she had wasted police resources, dragging law enforcement into a personal vendetta. That was the moment I decided that I wasn't just going to fight back. I was going to end this. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was scared, but because I was done. Susan had gone too far, and it was time to push back harder than she ever expected. She thought she could harass me into submission. wear me down until I either complied or left, but she had underestimated me. The next morning, I made calls. First, to my lawyer, then to the county zoning office, then to a friend who worked in local government. By the time I was done, I had everything I needed to make her life a nightmare. Susan had been so busy trying to intimidate me that she had forgotten one crucial detail. She wasn't untouchable either. I had my lawyer draft a cease and desist letter citing harassment, trespassing, and defamation. I sent copies to the HOA board, the sheriff's department, and the county office. Then I filed a formal complaint against Susan, detailing every single incident, from the trespassing and vandalism to the false police reports. I even included the security footage. But I wasn't done. My contact at the county office confirmed something I had suspected but hadn't been sure about. Susan had been bending the rules herself. It turned out she had made unapproved alterations to her own property, violating HOA and zoning regulations. By the end of the week, the county had opened an investigation into her violations. At the same time, my lawyer had successfully pushed forward with legal action, meaning that Susan wasn't just dealing with a simple complaint anymore. She was facing real legal consequences. I didn't hear from her for days. No letters, no threats, no HOA nonsense. It was eerily quiet, and I knew that meant she was scrambling. Then, one evening, just as the sun was setting, I caught movement at the edge of my property. I stepped onto the porch, arms crossed, and waited. Slowly, Susan emerged from the tree line, her face tight, her usual smugness replaced with something else. She stopped a few feet away, shifting uncomfortably as if she was debating what to say. I didn't move. I didn't give her an inch. She cleared her throat, muttered something about a misunderstanding, about how things had gotten out of hand, about how maybe we could come to an agreement. I didn't say a word. I just stared at her until she realized that whatever power she thought she had was gone. After a long, tense moment, she turned and walked away. A few weeks later, the official ruling came down. The county found her in violation of multiple zoning laws, forcing her to correct every unapproved alteration she had made to her home. The sheriff's department issued a formal warning regarding the harassment and trespassing complaints, putting her on notice that any further incidents would result in criminal charges. And the final blow? The HOA board, tired of the legal battles and negative attention, voted to remove her as president. Just like that, the woman who had made it her mission to control me lost everything. I watched from my porch as a moving truck pulled into her driveway one morning. She was leaving. For good. I took a deep breath, feeling a weight lift off my chest as I watched her house grow emptier by the hour. By nightfall, she was gone. No more threats. No more harassment. Just silence. I spent the next few weeks enjoying the peace I had fought so hard for. The land felt different now. Lighter, freer, truly mine in a way it hadn't felt before. My shed was rebuilt. My security cameras stayed up, and the pile of old violation letters ended up as kindling in a bonfire one evening. I had one. Not just against Susan, but against the idea that someone else could dictate what I did on my own land. One evening, as I sat on the porch, watching the sunset bleed across the sky, I thought about everything that had happened. About the warnings, the threats, the trespassing, the cops showing up at my door. And I smiled. Because at the end of it all, my land was still mine. And nothing, not an HOA, not a power-hungry woman, not a single damn rule she tried to enforce, had been able to change that.